Hi, welcome to another monthly episode of Consent Dojo. I'm Midori, and we have been at this for, I think, almost 3 years now. And every month we gather together, and I invite really interesting people to talk about various aspects of consent. Certainly, it first started off as talking about consent in BDSM, but that is just a small thing in terms of our daily action of agreement making, of being engaging in consent with oneself, agreement with others, agreement, whether it's person to person, company to company, or at a social or political or legal aspect. There is so much to talk about around consent that we can't leave it to just, hey, let's have a safe word, let's have risk-aware informed consent, etc. in play. We can go beyond that. And for those who have not seen previous episodes, we have talked about can we consent to art? We'll be talking a little about that. We've been talking about NCSF and how legal idea of consent works. We've talked about even what are we consenting to when we click on accepting the term of service. Click, because I do that. And so there's a lot that we're going to be talking about, and consent is an ongoing muscle building. And speaking of consenting to terms of service online, which leads me to, I had Wolfgang here talking on a previous Consent Dojo, and he's one of the organizers of this amazing conference called Securing Sexuality, which is like, here's how I'm describing it. White hat hackers meet privacy rights activists, meets teledildonic manufacturers, meets sex educators and therapists and people who are concerned with being good human. And all of that is happening in Detroit in October. And I'm so excited about going there because you, my dear, you are located in Detroit, and I'm going to get to hang out and maybe make some good trouble with you.
Yeah.
This beautiful human being, I am thrilled to call a friend and a colleague. And years ago, when I went to my first ASECT, and I'm walking through there going, oh, I don't know if anyone will know my work. And oh my God, it's all like, people with like big degrees. That. And then I see this gorgeousness walking through, and I'm like, oh my God, hi, I totally follow your Instagram and the work you're doing. And can I just like fangirl all over you? And that's how I finally got to make acquaintance with you. And that was an exciting weekend, and now we are. Tell us a bit about the complexity that is the wonder of you.
Oh, well, first off, thank you for the amazing intro, because at that conference, I was just like, wow, I've been selling your book for years, and I know your face so well, and I know your work so well. So it was mutual, and one of a very memorable day at a very memorable conference. So thanks for having me, first off. But my name is Zoë Ligon. On the internet, I often go by Thangria. I am the owner, founder of Spectrum Boutique, which is a online sex toy store, and we have a specific focus on education and an educational side to the site that's just purely articles, reviews, things like that. But I myself am an author as well. I wrote this book, Carnal Knowledge, Sex Education You Didn't Get in School. I also make art of various kinds. Everything from collage art to a installation piece I'm hoping to make in the next couple years using recycled sex toys. And then finally, my final hat I wear, I suppose, these days is adult content creation and OnlyFansing and all of that good stuff. But obviously, it all has a lot in common. Oh, and then my hobby, my active leisure these days is running a Discord. We're called the Effed Up Film Heads, and we like effed up movies, which means horror movies, thrillers, dramas that are particularly gutting. things like that. So we're going on, we're almost at 3 years of that being a thing where we stream movies with friends. I've hired, or not hired, but I've like had directors come on to do Q&A after their screenings and stuff like that. So that's what I do in my free time. And that's where I'm going to a film festival on Thursday. So it's been a very exciting year.
I did not know about this side of your hobby. You have so many things going on. It's amazing. I might also be hitting you up with, I need instruction on how to do a viewing party because I got all stuck. But anyhow, that's another moment of
Ooh,
conversation. Hey,
I've
viewers.
gotcha.
Awesome. Great, because I got all confused on that. Viewers, I would love it if y'all could help test out the Q&A box, which is where I would love for you all to ask questions. And we also have the chat box open for you all to talk amongst yourselves, but I would love a test. I see there's a comment already in there, but if somebody could test out the Q&A with a question you might have. Somebody asked, who's the host of Securing Sexuality Conference? Would like to find the event on Facebook. The link's not on the conference page. I'm not sure if they're on Facebook. I'm not sure. You will find the link to Securing Sexuality under, well, www.securingsexuality.com. And there you can contact Stephanie and Wolfgang Gerlich. I think I'm pronouncing the name correctly, the two producers and organizers of the event. I am one of the speakers. I am not an organizer. However, I am going to be talking about my pro-social sadism strategies online. Okay. And well, talking about consent and all that you are doing, there's, even before I knew about your Discord, which you just, I just found out about before we logged in, you have a lot of aspect that you do a lot of things that require or imply people to make agreements. Now, where do we drop in? How about art making, sampling, and image, using images, because you create amazing cut paperwork, among many other artwork, by the ye old tradition of sampling, which is legal and have legal frameworks around it, especially as you are doing media inspired as well as social satire and critique of body and sexuality and image production. And around that, first, show us some of the work and how show us some of the work first.
This is a book that was independently published, I want to say in 2015. It's called Woman with the Good Meat Removed. I think I still have a few copies left if anybody is really, in the mood for a collage art book. But as you can see, it's a lot of like art of subtraction. And, this is a woman who was, let me back up and start by saying that I wanted to visually express myself with a visual artistic medium and had no talent like drawing, painting. I tried photography, all of that jazz. I started doing collage work in high school, and I remember we had a assignment to make paper stained glass one time, and that's obviously what got me off on this tip that I followed through with. But at the time, I really didn't know that like anyone would ever actually see these images. This was something I created for myself and for whoever was paying attention to me online at the time, which back then was not very many people.
The source material of these images are?
Let's see. We have everything from like lifestyle, like home decor magazines to nudie mags, probably primarily stuff from the 80s and 90s. And as you can tell, some of them are using more of the original image than others, and some have faces more so than others. So, and a lot of them are explicit and have nudity in them. So I also tried to do bodybuilding magazines for a while. I really like, this is one of my favorites, I think. But yeah, I wasn't thinking about the fact that, these are people whose image I'm using, and even if it's a publicly available image and, I'm sampling something that is just out there in the world, I never thought anybody would see it. And there was never any issue that arose. I did do my research as far as being like, okay, what's the legality around this? Because eventually I did have publications asking me to illustrate articles. I illustrated an article for Time magazine where they provided me all of the images I could use, which was really helpful. But I think that was the first time I was like, oh, wow, people are taking this seriously. And at the time I was just like, oh, I just hope somebody notices me. I hope somebody notices what I'm doing. But it's the legality around collages and sampling art is very similar to music. So it has to do with a percentage of what is used. And, at the end of the day, it's all a gray area where you can say, hey, that's a picture of me. And I shot for this magazine and I didn't consent to my image being used in a collage. Now, keep in mind, I was not really profiting off of these collages in any way. I was a teenager making art, But this came up for me because I stopped doing it in my early 20s, and I couldn't figure out why I wanted to stop doing it. But I eventually realized, I was like, oh, I don't want to use pictures of other people. Even if I'm obscuring their image and who they are, this is kind of weird. And even if someone would be super flattered that their image was repurposed in this way, I said, you know what, I'm going to just work with my own image from here on out. And so this has kind of coincided with doing adult content or taking more nude images of myself, because I wanted to be anonymous for so long. And I think I would have done my own image from the get-go if I wasn't really afraid of people seeing me exposed in ways that I wasn't mentally prepared to be seen yet. But as I've gotten older and that has naturally become a part of my life, it's like, oh, I would love, I should be my own material, because there is no even question of consent involved if I'm using my own material. Don't have to worry about, the percentage of an image I'm using, or thinking about, like, is this person recognizable? All of that. And I saw someone put in chat. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
I'm
I've
going to
been
actually
talking.
push back on that there's no question of consent when dealing with oneself, because you are in conversation with Zoe of past, Zoe of today, and Zoe tomorrow. You have three
Yeah.
entities that you're having to navigate consent and agreement with.
Thanks for correcting me on that. You're right. It's funny because I think also in therapy, I think so much about past me being present in present me. And so that's, I guess, where it gets a little confusing, right? Because, my brain has been in here all along, but at the same time, child me in 20 years, whatever. Yeah, these are different points on a line of my lifetime. And yeah, I think that you bring up a really great point where we can sometimes non-consensually do things that we ourselves are not comfortable with, and yet we push ourselves to do things we're not comfortable with for some ulterior motive, whether it is for our own gain or for another goal. But I just in you saying that, you've opened this can of worms in my mind now.
Yeah, in terms of, okay, so using imagery, I have my own take on your work. I love your cut and collage work. The negative the removal of the body, and yet the act and the fetishization and some of the images remain. The images from public material or like magazines, etc., in a sense, there's an ease to using that, but I would almost think as using your own imagery, it's a different level of consenting to your own vulnerability and exposure.
Totally. I think it's also maybe younger me was really projecting onto these images of like, oh, this male photographer fetishized and sexualized these women, and I'm repurposing these images in a more feminist perspective. I don't know that that's necessarily what I was thinking at the time, but if I think back onto my mindset back then, I was like, of course this is art, and this is elevated smut or whatever, as though there's this hierarchy to it or whatever. Because yeah, you never know what was going on during a photo shoot, no matter how upset or happy somebody looks in an image. You never know, like, what was that set like. And I think younger me really assumed that it was all really grimy, or there was inherently no autonomy. I think that was a conclusion I would have drawn as a young adult, for sure.
Yeah. And what is it like for you to take the images that you've created of yourself and then to reinterpret that into another expression of yourself? Because I can, or me as Jane Doe or any other public can look at images you've created either at first layer or then subsequent production and evolution of this. You have no idea what we as audience project upon your art that is, well, derived from your physical being.
Yeah. I think that the ways in which I chose to cut the image away were primarily based on muscular build of the body and trying to kind of break it down into like muscular parts, even though I certainly was not anatomically correct in many instances. But it is really strange to have an image of myself that is, for all intents and purposes, a naked photo, a adult photo of some nature, and it leaves everything to the imagination, and yet it's all right there. And in many instances, the original photo is available somewhere online of myself, that I'm using the imagery from. But yeah, it is this thing where it's like, I'm posting this on Instagram, and this is, safe for work because there's nothing explicitly being depicted. But yeah, there's this definite slight vulnerability of like, oh, this is a modified nude at the end of the day. And
as posting it on social media, I mean, God knows I post a bunch of my own images or artwork. We've also consented for these platforms to own these images in the form that it appears on the platform.
yeah. I don't know why this didn't even come to mind earlier, and we don't have to spend a whole lot of time talking about this, but did we ever talk about when Richard Prince used an Instagram picture of mine in one of his portraits exhibits?
You did, and let's go with that. Explain the situation, and if there's a reference online, we can see about that. But
I probably like blocked it out, honestly,
yeah,
because it was so upsetting. I mean,
right, let's dive into that because I remember.
Yeah. I remember I was at the gym and I got a DM from somebody who worked at the gallery in Detroit that the show was being installed at. And he sent kind of a behind the scenes photo. He was like, just so you know, I'm hanging up this show right now, and there's a photo of you in it. And, obviously Richard Prince is the notorious person who likes to, a euphemism might be, push the boundaries of what we consider to be, repurposing of an image. And I was only like barely familiar with who he was at the time. So at first I was like flattered and honored, and I was like, cool. There is a huge 6-foot laser jet photo of me hanging in not only a gallery, a contemporary art gallery, but one in the city I live in. Like my face is up in an exhibit where I live 10 minutes from my house. And this is the first time hearing of it is from like a gallerist who's installing the piece. And then my flattery turned to anger when I realized who he was and some of his previous work. And that these were images that would be valued at, potentially 6 figures and up. And, and that's what the art is. The art is the creation of this conundrum of, just because it's legal and you can get away with it, which is actually, up for debate to begin with, whether it is legal. When you have all the money in the world and you're going up against independent creators, doesn't matter if it is legal or not, because, your options as a subject of someone else's sampling are, accept it and roll with the punches, or fight back and potentially have it blow up into a larger thing, which is what I did. And I engaged with him. I think if I could do it over, I would just not have acknowledged it, and it wouldn't have gone anywhere. It became this double-edged sword of like this terrible, upsetting, painful thing to have, and ironically, I'm a collage artist. So here I am having done similar things. But here's somebody doing it in a much more, a blatant way, and a less, someone who's taking a screenshot and adding a comment to a photo and then calling it their own artwork. I felt like a fool, honestly, because I walked right into his trap of what he wants me to do, which is to be outraged by it. And that creates the press for his show.
Ew.
And furthermore, he went on to say that I was a collaborator of his. So people thought that he might have used a different word, but he went on to say, I'm collaborating with this woman, which is true in the sense that he, like jacked my image or whatever. And then I engaged with it when he jacked it. But people interpreted that to mean that I was in on it from the get-go. So I had people that knew me being like, oh, so you had him do this, right? And I was like, no, I'm genuinely upset about this. I want the show to be taken down because this is such a fuck you to any person who's just like trying to get by as a creator or artist online. This was so many years ago too, that I feel like online art and social media is so different than it used to be. But I could just prattle on and on about that.
There's a parallel to also sexual exploitation as well. When you've got somebody with privilege, power, authority, money, and then you've got somebody of significantly less in the power dynamic realm, and the even like the privileged person, the one engaging in the predation, saying that, well, there was consent.
Yeah. And another thing was that all his subjects are historically very young women. It's not as though we're getting this smattering of all types of content creators. It definitely seems to target younger women. And I think specifically learning, I believe, about the Brooke Shields photo that he used. That is kind of what upset me and had me be like, oh, this guy is a fucking asshole. He's not creating commentary. He's exploiting, you know, he's
And
exploiting the and not in the case of Brooke Shields, but he's exploiting the fact that I am putting myself out there in this way. And I'm doing it in a way that feels good for me. And you've taken this and transformed it into something for your own
so
gain. Yeah.
there's no collaboration in this, because it's a situation where if you say nothing, it's advantage to him.
Yeah.
And if you say anything, it's advantage to him.
It's a PR campaign.
Yeah. So it's slimy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's slimy.
yeah, and collaboration assumes for engagement and agency.
Yeah.
And you and I are in bodies and businesses that are constantly having our agency chipped away or just outright denied. We were talking about you as one, a body, but also you as creator of your own imagery, but you are also a creator of your own business.
Yeah.
And I I think a lot of people don't put to mind, especially those with privilege and ease in making them their way through the world, don't think about the barriers that marginalized people, exoticized bodies, and marginalized and exoticized businesses end up facing. Oh, well, hey, you got a business. I mean, I'm kind of guessing that I bet there are people out there who think that, oh, well, you run a company and you got this like great online company and a profile, and life must be easy and you must be doing great. Tell me, people assume that, right?
Yeah, no, I'm stressed out. It's been a difficult year after these few years of pandemic and everything. And I don't need to go into too much detail to say, just like, I know my friends and business owners of all stripes are feeling a bit stressed right now. So yeah, I am certainly very thankful for my business and all that comes to me with that. But it's been quite a journey realizing that, I have to make myself vulnerable and put myself out there in order to direct traffic to an online website. If I don't put myself out there and, my business isn't putting itself out there, it's not going to be seen. It's not something that has foot traffic that walks by and can just stroll in. But a big component of this is like the financial discrimination. That's the most blatant way in which I'd say not just sex toys, but anybody who has anything to do with sexuality, whether you're creating adult content or you are an educator who, uses the most anatomical, wholesome anatomy terms, it's something that affects everybody pretty equally. Definitely the adult industry more so, but a lot of that has to do with legislation and specifically bills from extreme religious groups. And it kind of boils down to it being like a First Amendment question. Like right now, at least in the US, there is a lot of push to make certain types of sexual expression exempt from First Amendment protection, essentially. I mean, that already exists in the sense of sodomy laws, which are
Right.
still on There's still sodomy laws in Michigan, you know? So technically oral and anal sex are illegal here.
Consensual. Okay, so consensual butt sex among nice, straight,
Wholesome.
married, wholesome people is
Yeah.
still sodomy, y'all. And there
It's
you
still
are.
sodomy.
And you sell B-Vibe product. Don't you have butt plugs that you designed?
I
Actually,
do. I
oh my God,
do. Oh, I
you
wish I had them here. I should have brought them
smart
down.
peddler butt plug maker.
I
You.
know.
Uh,
Mm.
I want to point out to the viewers that many of sexuality educators, myself included, but certainly many of my colleagues, our material on social media is constantly being either taken out of the algorithm or accounts banned. In the meantime, images of violence and hatred seem to get a complete pass. So,
Yeah.
but you recently were in Washington, D.C. around
Yeah.
First Amendment rights, as well as the ability for people to not only create but access information. And this also includes safe, accurate, and humanistic and civil rights matter on basic sex ed. But tell us about what you were doing there and how you're the issue of censorship, as I think of censorship in this way, as reducing people's choices and agency and infantilizing citizens.
Yeah. A really good quote, I believe Mike Stabile from Free Speech Coalition said at XBiz this past year, something about how censorship isn't looking to be like an outside force censoring us. Censorship is trying to get us to completely get rid of the things we want to say out of our own fear of being censored. So the goal of censorship is for us to censor ourselves so that there is no external imposing censorship needed, because we just all follow the rules, even though the rules are very difficult to interpret most of the time. But the truth of the matter is that I was denied a savings account from a major financial institution when I started selling sex toys in 2015. I tried to, I had,
Account?
yeah, I couldn't have a savings account. Um, it was a bank that I had done my personal banking with up until that point, like my entire life up until then. And I was like, oh, of course I'm gonna, why not keep it all in the same bank? My business, open a business account. And my original LLC name was Spectrum Pleasure Boutique. So ding, 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 we got the word pleasure right there. Immediate red flag. They did not want to do business with me. And, it kind of boils down to no matter who you're actually directly talking with, once they figure out that you're working in a sex or sex adjacent industry, a lot of doors start closing for you. And it goes so far as, like securing a lease. I tried to get a brick and mortar store for a very long time and was denied a lot of opportunities to have a retail store. That's its own separate story. But it primarily affects the adult industry. And you would say, oh, these are all legal industries. But at the end of the day, it's Visa, MasterCard, and all of the people with money tied up in these large financial institutions that are not saying, oh, we have a problem with this. Maybe they do. They're saying, it is very likely that most of our customers will have a problem with this. So by associating with you, we are hurting the people who would, we believe, potentially have a problem with this. So
It's also the pressure from Sesta Fosta, right?
yeah, this started before that, but it's definitely directly related and has made it worse. And,
Can you give a brief explanation of Sesta Fosta?
yeah, I'd say the simplest way of putting it is that it's legislation that is supposedly designed to help prevent online abuse, sex trafficking, things that we all, don't like. We don't want, human trafficking is terrible. And Sesta Fosta is saying, there's these websites like Pornhub. Anyone can upload anything they want to this website. And, there's a lot of stuff on this that is directly linked to bad things like human trafficking.
Although a lot of that is fear-mongering window dressing.
Yes, because you could say the same of Facebook, you could say the same of Instagram, you could say the same of TikTok, which are, arguably a lot more moderated sites, specifically TikTok. But
and it doesn't address the human trafficking in agriculture and domestic slavery, essentially domestic servants and industry that is not necessarily directly about sex, but it's just as much people being exploited and trafficked. And yet the pearl clutching aspect of, oh no, this is about sex, and therefore all the people that we see in it must somehow be exploited. And yet that also, it adds to information control around reproductive services.
yeah.
Yeah. So the Fosta Sesta or Sesta Fosta, there's a link in the chat to look that up. Sunny Megatron also, I'll mention that she's also posted some really good journalistic blogging around the impact of Sesta Fosta and how it actually leans towards more family values or creating homophobic, transphobic, and misogynistic information control. So again, stripping of agency. So this has directly affected your business.
Yeah, it to the point that, the self-censorship has worked on me. I am very careful about products I pick up, or, if something will be perceived as pornographic, even if it's just a toy that has like a sexy photo on it.
So it's affected your even business purchasing than the merchandise you carry. So
yeah,
then this legislation to control sexual expression and business of that deals with human sexuality, even into sexual health, is impacting the products that are being made available to people.
yeah. And it's primarily financial institutions when we're talking about what I was going to DC to lobby against, basically saying like, hey, no privately owned bank has the right to deny an individual banking services if they are in a legal industry. But it's also the like website hosts, like the domain hosts, certain, service providers that plug into your website beyond just like credit card processing. Suddenly it's like that meme that's like, does your so-and-so consent to, it's like, oh, I didn't know I was having to ask the consent of my credit card company for me to do this legal thing that I, as an adult, am trying to do. I didn't realize that they had a say in this. So that's what's kind of strange about it. And if anything, puts people that they are saying they want to protect into far more vulnerable situations. Oh, if we see this person has bank deposits that are, identifiable as being related to sex work. Let's shut their account down and freeze everything so that they can't be taken advantage of anymore. Maybe this is someone who, that this is their financial account. Now they have their own name flagged in the, system. And there is a system that kind of has a checks and balances system. Like there's like a list of names and associated things that kind of make you be blocked from certain services. But
Yeah, wow.
but you're putting that person then in a situation where it's like, oh, well, I can't open a bank account in my own name. I now need my significant other to open this account. You're actually removing financial agency from the people you're saying you want to protect. And that's just one very specific example. But for instance, if I want to be paid via PayPal, I give them my boyfriend's PayPal email address. So thanks for protecting, thanks for protecting us. And that's such a small example. I'm not hurting at the end of the day by having my boyfriend collect my PayPal payments. But just think of the implications of that,
Yeah, magnifying that. And it goes back to the historical trivia, if you will. 1977 was when married women were first allowed to have their own check in the United States. And so before that, in 1976, a woman legally married could not have her own independent checking account, needed to rely on their male married partner. So how's that? It's very retrograde. In terms of self-censorship of image and content, I do that on my Patreon, and Patreon's pretty loose about it, and I still do that because I don't want to have that one little portal that I have to connect with people to be locked down. So yeah, I am having to be careful about language as well. And in the meantime, inflammatory, racist, and violent and sexist language gets a pass.
Totally. I mean, even before we started our call, I was like, oh, I have to be careful which images I show you out of this book because I don't want to jeopardize your platform, your brain starts thinking in all these strange ways. It's weird to say like I live in fear. Like I'm not living in fear every day. Oh no, what if this happens? But I do have a part of me every time I post something, no matter how innocuous it is, where I think, okay, if this is the straw that breaks the camel's back for whatever reason, and it does seem to be pretty arbitrary. I've just lost my main source of income, which is, social media channels that I've built up over the course of years and years. So it feels so, it's just, it is such a kick in the teeth to feel like I have to express myself. I'm reacting out of fear to the what ifs of what if this is perceived as to this or to that. I've learned a lot of things like, okay, on OnlyFans, for instance, this is perfect too, because I have my corn dildo here.
Wait, that's an actual dildo? That's not like,
Yeah.
that's not dinner. Okay. Wow. Oh, funny.
Oh, so this is a great example. OnlyFans has a rule that you are not allowed to upload any content that has a foreign object not intended for sexual stimulation. So, let's think about all the ways in which this is, good. Maybe we're potentially helping, types of content that are non-consensual, where there is more forced or abusive elements and inanimate objects being used in content. That's not great. I totally am on board with why OnlyFans would say that's not okay to show. But funnily enough, I did a video, not with this corn specifically, but I did some content with a very realistic silicone toy that was, I believe it was a corn. And it was immediately taken down as inappropriate for using an inanimate object not intended for sexual stimulation.
Except it was made for sexual stimulation. It just
Yeah,
happened.
but they don't know that. They don't
Yeah,
know that.
yeah.
So they were like, no, this is bad. This is bad. This is harmful.
And yet we also have limitations in platforms around showing things that are anatomically accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to post a lot of vulva illustrations, like Betty Dodson's vulva illustrations and things like that. I wouldn't, that was years ago. I would never take that gamble today. And like, you know how ridiculous I feel saying, as a sex educator, I would never post a picture of something that looks like an anatomic, that isn't a super cartoonish depiction of a body part. It's so infantilizing to all of us, really. I don't know if this is still the case, but I'll never forget someone saying that they submitted a research article to a medical journal and it was rejected for having the word clitoris in it. Medical research journals can't say clit. So I feel like that was at a Sex Down South. I learned that. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I have a vague memory around that, but yeah, it's the control against showing anatomical imagery, especially having to do also with gender variations on bodies. However, a sexualized swimsuit image is perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's always the minority identity, is whether it be Instagram censorship or financial discrimination, that are getting the brunt of the damage of what that does. Most sex workers, I mean, I used to have a sheet of stats, but a lot of sex workers are women or non-binary. A lot of sex workers are LGBTQ plus. It's like this overlap of like, these are communities that are already struggling to access certain resources, and you've just made it harder in the name of saving and protecting them. And I think that's the really gut-wrenching part of it, where it's like veiled as helpful. And that's and there's movies that come out. What's the movie that just came out? Someone in the chat will know, but there was a sex trafficking drama film that came out. I want to say it's like something Silence. There was a mainstream movie that came out that was like a dramatization of human trafficking. And people were like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This is just one recent example in a long list of media, I think, that is like, exoticizing what human trafficking, child exploitation, all of that looks like, and putting it in a movie format. Sound of Freedom. Yes. Thank you. That's it.
Oh, right. Yeah. And yet when the women or marginalized bodies or individuals speak up around harassment or assault, where are them knights in shining armor protecting the virtue?
Yeah. I used to really like to stand up and call out things that were injustices to me. I'd like to think I still do, but every single time I've tried, going back to Richard Prince, every single time I've tried to say like, hey, this is wrong, or hey, you did X, Y, and Z. And, you know, obviously our culture has changed a lot post, you know, the 2018 Me Too movement, the, you know, just things have changed a lot. But I feel like I'm like the butt of the joke when I'm trying to call attention to things that have hurt me or other people. And it does kind of slowly condition you over time to just shut up. Um,
Yeah. And being out and forward as sexuality educators and to live past shame then gets its own reshaming of the, well, you know, see what you get when you're out there talking about these things or showing your you know, what did you expect? And it goes back to that kind of old thing around, well, you know, look at how you're dressed. Kind of feels simple.
yeah, it's a very tricky thing to navigate, even just like in my own personal life, who I want to be honest with about who I am and what I do. It's like, you know, the typical, you're sitting next to someone on a plane and they, you know, you're chit-chatting with them. It's like, do you want to sign up to spend the duration of that flight having potentially a conversation you don't want to have? Or would you rather lie and pretend to be somebody that you aren't, which is less uncomfortable?
Right. So even as we are for nice upper middle America, the term authenticity and be who you are gets tossed around, and yet the ability to be who we are, to express who we are, and to be authentic is, and to consent to that, being able to engage in self-expression is limited to those who have the privileges and certain access to power.
Yeah, it's really hard to bust out of that ceiling.
Mhm.
It's I'm 31. I'm still got a lot of life ahead of me, obviously, but it's just, even in the past 5 years, been such a dramatic shift in my optimism towards all of this and how I approach things. And, you know, even just hearing myself say now, like, oh my God, it's like stressful to stand up for what I believe in. You know, me 10 years ago would not be proud of me today saying that, but me today knows, you know, you're putting your neck on the line in a lot of instances. How do we make people feel safer in standing up for what they believe in and being themselves holistically, not just me, Zoe, you know, but how do we all support that expression?
And you are one of not enough, but many sex positive feminist resource and retailer out there. So for you and for all of your colleagues in business, this is a daily reality of having to navigate being silenced, having to learn to self-censor, to have less and less resources available. And at the same time, there are those who appreciate your work as well as celebrate the work of you and industry like you and other independent feminist sexuality resources. And so in some sense, you're heroized and glamorized by a certain sector at the same time that you're villainized by another sector.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I it's really hard to not pay attention to the one person saying terrible things about you, even if there's 100 people saying amazing things. I don't know why the brain works that way, but it does,
And
especially.
and beyond the criticism, you're also being villainized by, well, policy,
Yeah.
whether it's a corporate policy for platform control or federal policy like SESTA FOSTA and access to bank and being able to run a business. You're trying to run a business with
Yeah.
full legitimacy and dot the I's and cross the T's and file all your forms and pay all your taxes
They're
and
filed. Yeah.
and yet and yet it doesn't make things easy. I want to take a pause right now and see if there are any questions. I
Yeah.
had some folks test out the Q&As. Somebody wrote that they just learned about a new conference. Excellent. I'm glad. Hopefully see you at Securing Sexuality. And somebody else asked, how often do these Consent Dojo discussions happen? Once a month, my friend, once a month. And I am always looking for interesting people. However, I want to open up questions for Zoe. What was the conference? Somebody else. Securing Sexuality, which is coming up in Detroit, and it addresses many issues around privacy, security, online security, sexuality, and as I said, it's like I think of it as a cross between white hat hackers, privacy rights activists, teledildonic manufacturers, activists, sex therapists, sex educators, and concerned citizens coming together. So I'd like to open this for those in attendance around questions they may have around your work and your struggles of engaging in who you are, expressing who you are, and running your business, and how it intersects with consent and decision making, or just anything people want to ask you around. And
Yeah.
I missed any questions along the way. Let's see.
And also just keep on talking.
Yeah.
Do some show and tell at any
Yeah,
point.
give us some show and tell while
Okay.
and yeah, and
Yeah,
I
while we
have a
accumulate.
question around how you're turning shame into beauty and what that might have to do with empowering people to speak their agency and engage in consent. So
Yeah. I mean, where should I begin? I've got a question. I can do show and tell. I can talk about
there
shame
is
and
a
beauty.
question in the chat about, is
Okay.
there a pushback that's being organized against
Yeah.
the draconian controls of industry and government?
So Free Speech Coalition is the group I lobbied with. They are an adult industry First Amendment protection group, essentially. They are really actively combating this and have written a lot of articles that can speak to this in a much more concise way than I can probably. And they've got all the legislation you can reference, all that good stuff. So Free Speech Coalition. There are definitely other groups and organizations. This is the one that I'm the most familiar with, who I've worked with directly, and I'm a supporter of theirs. Yeah, it's,
I'd like
you
to point
know,
out, yeah, I'd like to point out that those who, and yes, this is like sex worker and sex work adjacent rights, but even if viewers, if you don't consume products of erotic entertainment or image making or even sexuality information, even if you don't consume this, what the sexual entertainment industry, erotic entertainment industry, and what they are facing also affects everyday decisions of everyday people who don't consume the material.
yeah,
In forms of general censorship, book bans, and how safer sex or reproductive information is out there, and even how K through 12 education. I mean, just look at Florida and what's happening with basic teachers, K through 12, or even college professors not being able to talk about orientation, the don't say gay laws. So it all connects. So even if you don't consume the products of and the businesses of sex workers, it does affect all of us.
Another Mike Stabile quote, who's heavily involved with Free Speech Coalition, is that the adult industry is the canary in the coal mine. And I like that because I think it just sums up what you just said, where it's like, whether this is something you personally like or dislike, it's not relevant. It snowballs into a lot of other things. And this is the low-hanging fruit that can be very easily attacked. That is the first of many. I mean, I was going to use a domino, first domino to fall, but it scoops up all these other things that are just kind of like basic freedoms. But I think so is sexual self-expression as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And unintended consequences. So you got some show and tell?
I do. So I have been collecting used sex toys for an art installation. I'm trying to make a big structure out of recycled sex toys. Recycled meaning things that people have discarded, or it's a defective product. So I'm collecting these from brands and individuals. So brands that are kind of like collecting the extra trimmings, or like the oops product that didn't make it. I'm getting a lot of that sent to me, as well as people who are just like, hey, I have this ancient vibrator that doesn't work, or I just do not like it and I cannot repurpose it, and they're sending it to me.
Oh, I bet I have some, both my personal use stuff and my teaching props. And
yeah,
and like teaching props. By the way, there's a box of like 40 teaching dildos that I use for my scarf process, and I can't find it. For my infamous scarf harness thing. But along the way, I'll come across my teaching props, and when I do, I'll remember it. So tell us more about this.
yeah. This is I want to say maybe late 1970s, early 80s Hitachi. And we have the brand name. Let me see if you can even see that. Okay, it's not gonna focus, but there we go.
There it is. Yeah.
Beautiful. They don't make them like this anymore.
Does it work still?
It does.
Wow.
Let me see. You want me to plug it in?
Yeah.
Let me see if my cord will reach.
And I put it up against something that makes a sound. Not hearing it.
Oh, you're not hearing it.
No.
I guess it's, you know what? I bet the Zoom is like noise canceling it out because it thinks it's like ambient noise in the room.
Is there something you can rattle it up against?
You know what?
Well,
I was just like knocking it against that glass. So if you didn't hear that, I don't know.
no, didn't hear it at all. No, he said, put it up against someone.
yeah, right. Here, I'll bring out a more visual one then.
Now, what else you got there?
So this one does not even require an outlet to plug in at all. This is a hand crank vibrator. Let me see if I can get it going.
It kind of looks like a mechanical cake mixer.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same principle.
It's pretty quiet, but it basically is, a couple of gears.
It's steampunk vibrator.
Yeah, definitely.
Steampunk erotica.
I like
Be
this one
classic
a
and
lot.
put it up against the neck, right?
Oh, yes.
So sad. Yeah.
It's really funny because this is one that came internationally, and in the mail, like FedEx or whoever delivered it was like, excuse me, what is the contents of this package? And I was like, it is an antique handheld massager. And I'm so used to having to put funny things on customs forms to ship things, but it was just a particularly funny one because it's like not a vibrator. You know, it's like an antique. And so they were like, okay, well,
Yeah.
if it's an antique, what's its value? And I was like, I don't know. It's just in this funny category of historical piece, but also appliance. It's in that
Right.
middle ground.
But
Um, and
what are you
then
going to do with all of these?
so the super special ones like these ones I have, I'm looking to kind of put in their own little display cases, whether that be a part of my art installation or not. Um, this was a favorite simply because of the color. Um, but with like the general product I'm collecting, I want to kind of like compact it into, I don't want to like give away my larger vision, but I want to create an encasement where all the toys can go into them, and it's going to be like a clear acrylic structure that you can be inside of, but it's going to be all made out of sex toys.
Wow.
So I think I'm going to set the special ones off to the side, just for some kind of like timelines and histories of the vibrator. This kind of looks more like a Theragun, which is like a more
Huh.
modern thing, but this is this was made by Clipper, so it would have been, same company making
Oh, like
trimmers. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw or remember the giant sculpture that I made using memory objects from queer sex workers in vocation. So that
Yeah.
actually has a whole lot of sex toys, but also things like cell phones and costumes and all of that woven into it. Now, do you want people to send you their well loved and cleaned, y'all,
Yeah,
clean
cleaned. Yeah.
things?
I'll be cleaning them anyway, but pre-cleaned would be great.
Yeah. You want people to send that?
Yeah, if you want to email me, I am Zoe, Zoe, at spectrumboutique.com. And I will send you instructions because I have a special label that I can give you to affix to your package so that we know that it has a used sex toy in it. If you know what, it's nice to not be surprised when you're receiving packages. Oh, that's a used dildo. But just before I get too away with all the vintage vibrators, the reason I want to do this project, and it is still very much like something I am developing and it's still cooking, but I have so much sex toy trash. From 10 years of selling sex toys alone, I've, got so many boxes I have, sent to artists to repurpose. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm an artist. Why don't I just keep these toys and do something with them? And in less than a year, I've acquired like 3 or 4 pallets worth. So huge, I've got a warehouse with like a huge, huge, wood pallet stacked up for like 3 or 4 of those.
Whoa.
And if I, as one person, can accumulate that much sex toy trash in a year just from posting online,
Keeping
think
it out of
about, yes, but I know I'm not going to like fix the problem single-handedly, but there are so many parts of a sex toy that are recyclable. The lithium ion battery can be removed and separately recycled, but nobody does that because, first of all, if you take your sex toy, first of all, people don't want to take their sex toy to a recycling center to begin with. They feel uncomfortable. But even if a recycling center explicitly said, give us your sex toys, people would still just be like, I'd rather just throw this in the garbage and not think about it. Now, I know we all live in different places where recycling is more or less accessible. I I have a cabin up north where I have to drive my recyclables to a specific bin and dump them in the, facility myself. So it's not just like putting it out on the street. But anyway, yeah, I guess I just want there to be more awareness, both from manufacturers and consumers, but then also, waste management, about how, because this is such a taboo industry, our trash is like just completely ignored, and we're throwing out some really toxic, again, lithium ion batteries. Like, you're not supposed to just chuck those in the trash can, but we do, because we don't really have a better way, or a way that people feel comfortable doing
Right.
it.
A really good point. Really good point on this. Thank you. Wow. And I want to see these giant pallets and stuff when I come see you.
Yeah, it's not that exciting because they're all in brown boxes and
Oh,
all.
still, just like the scale, the sheer scale of
Yeah,
it.
I'll send you a picture later.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, and I can put it in my Patreon. Uh Complete aside, sorta,
Mhm.
maybe. Um Thanks for the amazing stuff for the Fort FM that's relaunched. So thank
Yeah,
you.
I
Thank you.
had such a great time, and obviously was just thinking about it prior to hopping on this call. It's funny, actually. This has nothing to do with Fortifem, but I injured my neck that week, and I was wearing a neck brace during the class. So I did the whole workshop in a neck brace, which I forget is the case, but I was reminded because I similarly injured my neck a couple weeks ago, and I was like, this is taking me back to the Fortifem days.
Uh,
But it was such a great time. I learned so much. I think you've single-handedly taught me more about kink than any other person or resource, just because, and I also am so lucky I just get to chit chat with you sometimes, and just hearing the way you talk about things, or just even at the top of this conversation when you're like, wait a minute, you like, consent with yourself isn't inevitable. And I'm just like, of course, you have such a good way of reframing things, and yeah, putting things into perspective, and the control exchange, the sensation exchange, and all of that stuff. If you know Midori, you know what I'm talking about.
and having you as part of the Fort FM Society, and got another one coming up. I'll be talking to you about that. But I got some good questions coming up in the side that I want to address too. What was this?
Okay.
Um, Sorry, y'all. I'm like a queen of digression here. Do you have any tips for sex educators who are trying to navigate online censorship? For instance, tip for relying less on social media, etc.
Ah, yes. I think that I've had a lot of luck with like spoken word, like something exactly like this. I think that audio and video, while there is still like AI that can scan things, I do feel a little bit more comfortable expressing myself when there's like video and audio, because I think there's more context available to the listener. But also, it's harder for, like an image is just, when you post an image, the technology
Like
is at the point where
like
it's
a
like,
porn. Yeah.
yeah, it sees the word sex is in your image. Doesn't matter if that's in the caption or not. Um, I think it just depends on what you're comfortable with. I think there's some people who go the route of using a ton of euphemisms, you know, spelling words incorrectly to circumvent the censors, but that also feels really infantilizing. So I understand not wanting to do that. Um, Again, spoken word and not on camera, just like going around and being physically present and talking about sex. I think like even just one-on-one conversations are so powerful and really easily overlooked. And
And then
some of the more,
there's also the word of mouth too, and
yeah,
forming connections with with colleagues and allies that can get the word out despite of this. As for the euphemisms, that's a classic queer strategy of euphemisms, of trying to get by with who one is despite the erasure and violence faced upon the body and the personage.
Yeah. So very
This is
personal decision how you want to approach that. And I commend anybody who's trying to put information out there, no matter how you're doing it.
the person who asked about the tips for sex educators who are trying to navigate online censorship. You might also take a look at the material that Sunny Megatron has accumulated. I would suggest that, as well as the magazine that Sunny's executive editor for, which is Zipper Magazine. There's a lot in there. And if you are also able to, I have my regular office hours in my Patreon. There's also organizations and like Facebook groups for sexuality educators, or the Sexual Health Alliance network, where such strategies are being discussed. It's kind of like being on the mole side of whack-a-mole and trying to
Yeah.
survive. There's that. I see another question here of an individual who's left, so hopefully they'll catch this in the recording. They said, have to get going now, but thanks so much for making this happen. I've learned so much from this webinar and look forward to exploring more of the links and ideas brought up here. Oh, okay, so not a question, but a gratitude to you.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and what else? Let's see. Another writes, recently I was at a Starbucks and asked if I should recycle or trash a paper plate. I was told it made no difference. The two containers were combined as trash at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah, that happens a lot too.
Another, I love this idea of recycling old toys that would otherwise go in the trash. This brings up thoughts for me about dealing with our sex waste and unpacking shame around that. It even makes me wonder about waste from the sex industry as a whole. Looking at all these cool vintage toys tonight, I'm sad to imagine all the decade-old toys that are living in landfill right now. Yeah. And yet this is the nature of ephemera. So like you go back to Japan, and if you can find these, like there are these weird little museums, they're almost like road shows that in like old Americana, but there are these tiny little weird museums that will have pleasure devices. And I don't mean museum in the sense of like MoMA or the Smithsonian, but somebody's cabinet of curiosity, right?
I'm trying to make a cabinet of curiosity for sure.
And if you find things like twisted sinew that's made into pleasure toys, and these items that are ephemera, laced with shame or hidden or thrown away, things that were not thrown away end up becoming museum items. So yeah, sex waste and unpacking shame around that. Yeah, including bodily waste, including body fluids, including, say, like menstrual blood. A whole lot of shame around that, and yet it's a wonder of physiology.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me see what else we got here. Thank you for posting the various links. Okay. Now, what else you got? Last we were in contact, you were talking about Spectrum branded items. I know this is not about
Oh, yeah.
I'm curious about what
Yeah.
you're up to lately.
I'm creating my own in-house brand. I mean, it's not my brand, but the Spectrum brand has its own in-house brand that will be coming out in the next, well, something will be coming out hopefully in the next week, and then more in the next month or so. But basically, what I am trying to do is just provide products to people at a much more affordable price and take existing shapes, not reinventing the wheel, not making something that's an identical clone, but, a G-spotter, a external compact vibrator, a butt plug. I've been kind of Frankensteining, working with factories to put better motors or motors I like a bit more into toys, pick the colors. So kind of just like, that's why it's called Spectrum Essentials, because I'm not looking to create anything specific and fancy, but I want to create affordable quality products. I'm third-party testing everything for the materials and electronics, which is really important to me. Just, extra assurance that there aren't any chemicals in the sex toys, which is a whole other thing. But yeah, just trying to be able to offer quality things at more affordable prices, essentially. But I also do have things that I'm like concocting that are a little bit more like fancy and designed. That will take a little bit longer though.
Yeah. When they do come out, when they do come out, I want to invite you on to my Patreon side of things so you can show us without any censorship.
I would love that.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Yeah. The things that you're up to and you come up with, it's always so exciting. So exciting that I am delighted to have you as a friend and colleague, and I just feel like so blessed for this connection, and I get to see you. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's been too long. And likewise, very, very thankful to be able to call you a friend and, just like a person I've learned so much from. And I know we were talking, and this is your series and all that, but I'm like, gosh, I just want to hear you talk, honestly.
You know what? Okay, I've got a wacky idea. So recently I learned that there is this town called Dildo, Canada.
Yeah.
I want to take a road trip to Dildo, Canada with you and just see
Do
what
it.
we can come up with that has
yeah.
Oh, somebody wrote Patreon has no censorship. No, that's not true. Patreon does have a limit as to what I can put on. However, what I end up doing is I post a link in Patreon for a private Zoom meeting. So then the link is mentioned in my Patreon and it's made available for my Patreon subscribers, but it's hosted entirely by me. So that is actually another way in which I strategize getting around things. But that way it's also private, and I am the queen of the hill, and if anyone's being rude, they get taken out of the room. So yeah, Dildo, Newfoundland, Canada. We gotta go. We gotta go. That'll be so much fun. What else? Yeah, at the end of Consent Dojo, I like my guests to give either some sort of a homework or a thought exercise around something to do with consent, that if you might leave us with.
Ooh. Oh, I wish I had prepared something.
So I just kind of popped this on you. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's totally okay. I mean, I think something having to do with how do you navigate consent with your past self and future self is a really great one that I'm honestly just going to steal directly from you, because you kind of gave me that assignment at the top of the show.
Great. Yeah. Yeah, I think back to my younger self, and I don't know, I'm looking at what you were getting done in your 20s, and I'm like, oh my God, I mean, I was just like an idiot. I was just, running around, partying in San Francisco, exploring and things, and like, yeah, oh, that seems fun. I'll say yes. Not really much of a deep thinker then. So I'd
say that's learning.
My past self kind of was like, oh, this seems interesting, like so naive, so naive, but it was San Francisco in the 90s was a safe place to be naive. I mean, HIV notwithstanding, still there was like resources for that. It was a place where, time and place where I could still be naive and also not have to be, living wasn't all that expensive. So yeah, my younger self had the fortune of being able to be in my naivete in a place that accepted weirdness. Yeah.
Yeah.
What does consent with past and future selves imply for the partner who uh partner at the to heard at the moment, partner at the moment? Yeah. The past self and the past, present, and future self. It's kind of like Christmas Carol discussing the story, the Christmas Carol, uh, discussing consent with the past self. Mistakes of my past informs who I am now, and the fears of my past have limited my self now. So how am I limiting and informing my future self?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think just a brief example of how it's very concretely come up in my life is, you know, if I have a photo of myself that I took and it's a nude of myself, I took it and sent it to somebody, during my adult life, obviously, but I was not taking the photo with the intention of ever having it be a public facing image, again, posted on a website like OnlyFans. What does it mean to take an image that you initially took for one purpose and one reason, and then years later repurpose it and put it out into the world in a very different way? My personal conclusion I came to with that is again, adult younger me would trust future me to make the right decision. So I guess it's kind of like this, that is the conversation.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you sit with something and it doesn't feel right, it's not right. But I think like I bridged that gap for myself of thinking about that and just being like, no, like 25-year-old me trusts 30-year-old me and vice versa, to know what's
Yeah.
right at that time.
Yeah. So there's a thought exercise around consent with oneself, temporal consent. Yeah. And someone else writes, I was listening to a podcast recently that mentioned Girls Gone Wild videos where drunk women were regularly being filmed and probably couldn't get consent at the moment. Yeah. For those who are here live, I would love to have you put in words of appreciation for the time that Zoe's spending with us. And if we're lucky, when I go to Detroit, we'll have some fun things to share with you in our various social medias and our uh, 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 Patreons or whatever's. And one writes, well done to you both. Thanks so much. Another, thanks both. This was wonderful. Yeah.
Thanks,
And
everybody. Really appreciate everybody's comments and questions and
another one,
positive presence.
this great, much appreciation to you both. 3 cheers for our speakers. Thanks for your thoughts, and thanks you two for this very nice moment. I also want to give a little hint for the next month Consent Dojo. We will be talking about human and synthetic relationship and consent therein. We are now fully stepping into the 21st century. And what does it mean to get consent from your love doll?
That's great. I'm going to be definitely tuning in for that.
And there's somebody that had like poly relationships with various different synthetic entities and then
Yeah.
had breakups. And what do you do
Yeah.
when your avatar in a virtual space is having a relationship with another avatar, but that also other avatar entity has also synthetic entities that they are having significant relationships with? And
Yeah. That's going to be such a great episode. That's amazing.
All right. On that note, I'm going to close this and let's all keep working on building our consent muscles because it is a daily exercise. Mwah.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure seeing your face.
And I'll be seeing you soon, and I'm going to drop you an email.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon. Thanks, everybody.